Before Clint Eastwood became Hollywood's most fearless cowboy, one miscalculation nearly ended his life and career forever. This is the story of how cinema's toughest star learned that some prices are too high to pay for perfection. The rope snapped at 60 feet. For 3 terrifying seconds, Clint Eastwood plummeted toward the Rocky Canyon floor, his life hanging by a thread thinner than the script that brought him there. It was 1968, and what was supposed to be Hollywood's next great Western was about to become its deadliest tragedy. The morning of September 15, 1968, began like any other day on the rugged Colorado film set of Hang 'em High. The desert sun cast long shadows across the canyon walls as the cast and crew prepared for what director Ted Post believed would be one of the film's most spectacular sequences. Clint Eastwood stood at the edge of Dead Man's Canyon, studying the 60-foot drop that would serve as the backdrop for his character's dramatic escape scene. This wasn't just another Western for Clint. After the massive success of Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy, he was determined to prove that American Westerns could match the intensity and authenticity of their Italian counterparts. Every detail mattered, every shot had to be perfect, and Clint was willing to push the boundaries of what was considered safe in 1960s Hollywood. The stunt itself seemed straightforward enough on paper. Clint would be lowered over the canyon edge on a safety rope, simulating his character's desperate attempt to escape pursuing lawmen. The plan called for him to swing across the canyon face, drop to a narrow ledge 20 feet below, and then climb to safety. It was ambitious, visually stunning, and exactly the kind of authentic action sequence that would set Hang 'em High apart from the studio-bound westerns of the era. Stunt coordinator Jake Morrison had worked on dozens of Western films, from John Wayne epics to smaller budget odors. He was a careful professional who believed in multiple safety measures and extensive rehearsals. But Clint had his own ideas about how the scene should be filmed. "I want this to look real," he told Morrison during their morning meeting. "No obvious safety measures, no fake backdrops. The audience needs to feel the danger." Morrison was concerned. The canyon location was beautiful, but treacherous, with loose rock, unpredictable wind patterns, and a drop that could kill a man instantly if something went wrong. "Clint, we can get the same effect with a smaller drop and better safety equipment," he suggested. But Clint was adamant. This scene would make or break the film's credibility. The crew spent 2 hours rigging the equipment, a single safety rope, rated for 3 times Clint's weight, secured to a massive boulder at the canyon's edge. The rope had been inspected that morning and declared sound. Backup safety measures were discussed, but ultimately dismissed as too visible to the cameras. In 1968, the philosophy was simple. If audiences could see the safety equipment, the illusion was broken. As the sun climbed higher and the desert heat began to build, Clint made his final preparations, unaware that he was about to face the most dangerous 3 seconds of his life. The stunt planning session took place in Ted Post's trailer at 6 a.m., with coffee growing cold as the team pored over hand-drawn diagrams and topographical maps of Dead Man's Canyon. Present were Post, stunt coordinator Jake Morrison, cinematographer Leonard South, and Clint himself, still dusty from his morning horseback ride to survey the location. "Here's what we're looking at," Morrison explained, pointing to a detailed sketch of the canyon wall. "Clint starts here at the main edge, gets lowered 15 feet to build momentum, then swings across to this ledge system. The key is controlling the arc so he doesn't slam into the rock face. The plan required precise timing and perfect equipment, with no room for error at 60 feet above jagged rocks." Post was enthusiastic but cautious. "Leonard, can you get the camera's position to capture this without showing our safety setup?" The cinematographer studied the angles, calculating sight lines and camera positions. "If we use the single rope system, I can shoot from the far rim and keep everything out of frame. But Jake, what about backup safety?" Morrison had already considered this. Standard procedure would be a double harness system with 2 independent ropes, but visibility is the issue. Any backup system will be in the shot. He looked directly at Clint. "Your call, but I strongly recommend the double system, even if it means compromising the visual." Clint studied the canyon through binoculars, his mind already visualizing the sequence. How many westerns have we all seen where you can spot the safety cables, where the stunt looks so obviously safe that it takes you right out of the story? He lowered the binoculars and turned to face the group. This scene has to feel real, completely real. If that means using a single rope and trusting our equipment, then that's what we do. Morrison pulled out the technical specifications for their rope system. This is military-grade climbing rope, rated for 2,000 pounds. Clint weighs 185. Mathematically, it's more than adequate. He ran his fingers along the documentation. The anchor point is solid granite. The hardware is all climbing grade. But Murphy's Law says, "Murphy's Law doesn't make movies," Clint interrupted. "Look, Jake, I've been doing my own stunts since the rawhide days. I trust your expertise, I trust the equipment, and I trust my own instincts. We do this right. We do it once, and we get something nobody's ever captured on film before." The meeting concluded with handshakes and nervous smiles. Morrison would later tell investigators that he'd felt uneasy about the decision, but in 1968, the star's word was final. The stage was set for a stunt that would change Hollywood safety protocols forever. The first rehearsal took place at 10 a.m., with Clint wearing a simple leather harness connected to the climbing rope. The initial test involved lowering him just 10 feet over the canyon edge to check the equipment and his comfort level with the exposure. What should have been a routine safety check revealed the first troubling signs that something wasn't quite right. "Hold up!" Jake Morrison called out as Clint was lowered over the edge. "Bring him back up." The stunt coordinator had noticed something that made his stomach tighten with concern. The rope was stretching more than anticipated under Clint's weight, and there was a slight twisting motion that hadn't appeared in their calculations. Back on solid ground, Morrison examined the rope carefully. "This stretch is normal for this type of line," he told Ted Post, who had jogged over with obvious concern. "But it's more than I expected. The dynamics change when we add the swinging motion." He ran the rope through his hands, feeling for any irregularities. Everything seemed normal, but his instincts were telling him otherwise. Clint, still wearing the harness, was eager to continue. "Jake, that felt fine to me. What's the problem?" Morrison explained his concerns about the rope dynamics and suggested they consider a different type of line with less stretch. "That would mean delaying the shoot for at least a day while we source new equipment," Post interjected, checking his watch. "We're already behind schedule and fighting the weather." The second test lowering went to 20 feet, and again, Morrison noticed irregularities. The rope seemed to be developing a slight fraying where it passed over the canyon edge, despite the protective padding they'd installed. "This is normal wear," Morrison assured himself, but he made a mental note to inspect the line more carefully before the actual stunt. Cinematographer Leonard South was positioned across the canyon with a telephoto lens, watching the rehearsals through his viewfinder. "From here, everything looks great," he called across the divide. "The single rope is completely invisible. This is going to be incredible footage." His enthusiasm was infectious, and even Morrison began to feel more confident about the setup. During the lunch break, Morrison performed one final inspection of all equipment. The rope passed every test he could think of, the anchor point was solid, and the harness showed no signs of stress. But as he coiled the line, he noticed something that would haunt him for years afterward. A single strand of the rope's core, barely visible, that seemed slightly discolored. In 1968, stress analysis of climbing equipment was primitive compared to modern standards. Morrison made the fateful decision that the discoloration was merely aesthetic. The afternoon session would be the real thing, with cameras rolling and no second chances. Action! Ted Post's voice echoed across Dead Man's Canyon at 2:47 p.m. Clint Eastwood took a deep breath, checked his harness one final time, and stepped backward toward the canyon edge. The cameras were rolling, the crew held their breath, and for the first few seconds, everything went exactly according to plan. The initial descent was flawless. Clint dropped the planned 15 feet with controlled precision, his body positioned perfectly for the crucial swing across the canyon face. Jake Morrison, monitoring from the anchor point, watched the rope's behavior with professional satisfaction. The arc looked perfect, the timing was exact, and Clint's form was textbook. "Beautiful," whispered Leonard South from his camera position across the canyon. Through his telephoto lens, he could see Clint beginning the lateral swing that would carry him to the target ledge. This was the moment they had planned for, rehearsed for, and dreamed about. The shot that would make Hang 'em High unforgettable. Then, at exactly 60 feet above the canyon floor, physics and fate conspired against them. The rope snapped with a sound like a gunshot, not gradually, not with warning, but instantaneously and completely. One moment Clint was swinging gracefully across the void. The next, he was in freefall with nothing but air and gravity between him and the jagged rocks below. Time dilated in that horrible way it does during life-threatening emergencies. Morrison screamed, "No!" but his voice seemed to come from very far away. Post's hand moved toward the camera, an instinctive gesture to stop filming that came far too late. Leonard South, watching through his lens, couldn't process what he was seeing. Clint fell for exactly 2.8 seconds, a span of time that would replay in slow motion in his memory for decades. During those seconds, his stunt training kicked in with automatic precision. He managed to twist his body, arms spread for balance, trying to control his descent even as he plummeted towards certain death. The impact came with a sound that Morrison would never forget. Not quite a crash, more like a heavy thud followed by complete silence. Dust rose from the canyon floor, obscuring their view of the impact site. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. The crew stood frozen in shock, unable to process that their carefully planned stunt had just become a potential tragedy. "Get the rescue team down there now!" Morrison's shout broke the paralysis. He was already rigging a rappelling system, his hands shaking as he worked. 60 feet below, Clint Eastwood lay motionless in the dust, blood visible even from their elevated position. The 3 seconds that changed everything were over. The real drama was just beginning. Jake Morrison rappelled down the canyon wall in under 3 minutes, a descent that normally would have taken 10 with proper safety protocols. His heart hammered against his ribs as he approached the motionless figure of Clint Eastwood, sprawled awkwardly among the rocks where he had landed. The sight that greeted him was both better and worse than he had feared. "Clint, can you hear me?" Morrison dropped to his knees beside the fallen actor, his training taking over despite his shock. Clint was breathing, shallow and irregular, but breathing. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, and his left arm was bent at an unnatural angle, but he was alive. "Don't move," Morrison whispered, as much to himself as to Clint. "Just stay still." Above them, the film crew scrambled to implement an emergency plan that nobody had hoped they would need. Ted Post coordinated with the local rescue services, while Leonard South documented everything with his camera, not for the film, but for the investigation that would inevitably follow. The nearest hospital was 40 miles away across rough desert roads, and every minute counted. Clint's eyes fluttered open just as the professional rescue team reached the canyon floor. "Did we get the shot?" were his first words, spoken through gritted teeth and obvious pain. Morrison almost laughed despite the circumstances, even facing potentially career-ending injuries. Clint's first concern was the film. "We got it," Morrison lied smoothly. In truth, the cameras had captured everything: the perfect setup, the catastrophic rope failure, and the sickening impact. The footage would become legendary in Hollywood circles, shown in safety training seminars for decades to come, but it would never appear in the final cut of Hang 'em High. The helicopter evacuation took place at sunset, with Clint strapped to a rescue board and sedated against the pain. Morrison rode with him, holding the failed rope section that would be analyzed by experts. The preliminary examination was devastating. The rope had failed due to a manufacturing defect that no field inspection could have detected. A single compromised strand in the core had gradually weakened under stress until it reached the catastrophic failure point. At Colorado General Hospital, doctors confirmed what Morrison had suspected: severe concussion, broken ribs, shattered left radius, and extensive soft tissue damage. "He's lucky to be alive," Dr. Patricia Wells told the assembled group. "Another few feet and the outcome would have been very different." The accident investigation took 3 weeks and resulted in the first comprehensive stunt safety protocols in Hollywood history. insurance companies began requiring double safety systems for all aerial work. The Eastwood incident, as it became known in industry circles, marked the end of the anything for the shot era and the beginning of modern stunt safety practices. 25 years later, in 1993, Clint Eastwood stood at the podium accepting his Academy Award for Best Director for Unforgiven. In his brief acceptance speech, he made a comment that few in the audience understood. "I learned a long time ago that no shot is worth a life, and no film is worth a death." Those who knew the story of Dead Man's Canyon understood exactly what he meant. The 1968 accident had changed everything for Clint, both personally and professionally. The physical recovery took 6 months, but the psychological impact lasted much longer. For years afterward, he experienced anxiety during any stunt work, even simple horseback riding scenes. The fearless confidence that had characterized his early career was replaced by a more measured approach that emphasized planning and safety over spontaneous heroics. But perhaps the most profound change was in how Clint approached filmmaking itself. When he began directing his own projects, starting with Play Misty for Me in 1971, safety became his absolute priority. He was the first major star to refuse to work with stunt coordinators who couldn't demonstrate comprehensive safety protocols. His sets became known throughout Hollywood as places where spectacular action could be achieved without compromising anyone's well-being. The broken rope from Dead Man's Canyon was eventually analyzed by metallurgical experts who confirmed that the failure was undetectable with 1968 technology. The manufacturing defect had existed in the rope's core from the day it was made, slowly weakening until it reached the exact moment when physics demanded its failure. The accident had truly been unforeseeable, but that didn't make it any less devastating or educational. Jake Morrison never worked as a stunt coordinator again. The guilt of not somehow preventing the accident haunted him, despite official findings that no reasonable safety measure could have predicted the rope failure. He became an advocate for stunt safety, consulting on the development of new equipment and protocols that are still used today. Hang 'em High was completed using a stunt double for the canyon sequence, which was reshot with multiple safety lines and protective equipment. The film was successful, but for Clint, it would always be remembered for what happened off camera rather than on. The original footage of his fall was locked away and never released, though it became a crucial teaching tool for understanding equipment failure. Today, when young stunt performers ask Clint about the keys to longevity in action films, his answer is always the same. Respect the danger, trust your team, and remember that living to work another day is more important than any single shot. It's a lesson learned at 60 feet above a canyon floor, where 3 seconds taught him the difference between courage and recklessness. Have you ever learned a life-changing lesson the hard way? Share your story in the comments below.
Don't forget to hit the like button if you liked the video and subscribe if you want videos like this to come. See you in the next story.